All right, how's everybody doing? Everybody still awake? Long day? Well, we're finally at the end here. We have a great closing for you, but first want to go over a couple things. The first thing I want to do on behalf of everybody at WIT, I want to thank everybody that came today for the inaugural Great Lakes Digital Transformation Summit. We hope you've enjoyed it. It's not over yet, though, so stay tuned. Just want to make sure that everybody had a chance to visit all the different vendors that were out in the hall. Remember, if you got scanned 15 out of the 17 vendors and sponsors, in the next few days you'll see an email come out with your $25 gift card from Amazon. So if you were able to do that, you will get your gift card. Survey raffle feedback. After the closing keynote and the panel discussion, we're going to be passing out, and I see some folks already filling them out right now, the surveys. You'll get a little raffle ticket, and at the end we're going to raffle off a $100 gift card for Amazon as well. So make sure you fill those out for us. Every year when we do an event, we use these to make it better and better every year. It's very important. Your feedback is very important to us, so please make sure that you do that for us. Also, some of the sponsors have individual raffles as well. So at the end, we're going to have the various sponsors come up who are doing the raffles to be able to raffle off their prizes as well. You have to be present, though, to get the prizes. So stick around afterwards. We'll make sure you get that as well. And now, the moment I know I've been waiting for all day is our closing keynote, which is a Tri-County CIO panel. And I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Chad Livengood, who is the senior editor of Detroit Business Crains.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I'm Chad Livengood. I'm a senior editor at Crain's Detroit Business. I cover public policy, and political issues for Crain's, as well as the city of Detroit. I want to introduce our panelists today, have them come up as I name them off. Mike Timm, he is the Chief Director of IT for the Oakland County. He's been in that job since 2017. Previously, he was Director of Business Planning and Project Management at Meridian Health Plan. Second panelist is Carlos Perez, and Carlos is the Chief Information Officer of Wayne County. He has been in that position, I'll let him tell you. 3 years, thank you. I know you told me that earlier. I've been there 3 years, and he came to county government from Quicken Loans. Got an interesting trajectory from the private sector to the public sector. And then our third panelist is Jako van Blerk. He is the Chief Information Officer of Macomb County, and he has a extensive career in the private sector as well before he came to Macomb County. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on stage. I want to start with, tell me just a little bit about, start with Jako with your background, so we'll just kind of get everybody a little introduced into how you got in the position that you're in, a little bit of career trajectory, just kind of briefly, and then we'll get into some media questions.
Yeah, I started my career in IT in the late 90s, worked for a consulting company in Detroit, and 2003 I got a job as a network specialist at Macomb County, and that's where I started my career and kind of worked my way up in the organization. And in 2016, late 2016, I took over as CIO.
Okay. What was your trajectory, Carlos?
I don't think my trajectory was straight at all. I started out in electrical engineering, and I touched my first computer when I was 20 years old back in 2001. I had a knack for it, and I basically worked my way up the ranks from being a desktop technician to a call center representative to a network engineer to a systems engineer working at Quicken Loans, and now a CIO.
Okay, and Mike?
Yeah, I, similar to Carlos, started as an electrical engineer and started out building cars. And I'm very grateful for that background. I love manufacturing. Spent many years at EDS and HP, and did a lot of software development and networking and project management and process improvement kind of were tracks that I went through. And you know, as I left HP in 2012, went to a couple other different sectors, if you will, in the private sector. And 2.5 years ago, took the director job at Oakland County. And it's my first public sector kind of assignment, but it's a great integrative experience for me.
In county government, you are a service agency, you know, to the public, to other government agencies. Can you tell us kind of a little bit about some of the initiatives you've taken to improve service delivery using technology or apps or any kind of other types of interfaces that, you know, in the past were just a paper process, and now you've digitized that?
Yeah, you know, we did some different things in Macomb County. One of the things we did in the county was to stand up a computer-aided dispatch system. It was on the heels of a really state-of-the-art emergency services center that they built in Macomb County. And you know, it was a great thing is to help our cities and Macomb County local government in general to be able to dispatch for police and fire. But some of the things that came out of that was things that citizens are now able to text to 911. You know, something that I believe can be very valuable in certain circumstances. The ability to do smart 911, which is you can go and create a profile, and once that profile is created, it follows you all over the country. So if you do call 911, the dispatcher have quite a bit of information available to assist you without you having to inform the person of all of that. And then, you know, something else we did in that center was to start engaging our schools in Macomb County and get access to school cameras. There's obviously agreements in place for that, but and also did some school shooting simulations and continue to work on that. Hopefully something we never have to use, but you know, trying to make sure that we can help our communities in case of emergency.
Carlos, what kind of public-facing interfaces have you guys developed?
Okay. So when you think about Wayne County, I know it's been a long day, so I'm going to try not to bus chuck anyone at Wayne County or the things you might have heard of, but honestly, government can be kind of slow and behind, and Wayne County has been facing some really difficult times for a really long time. So when I got there, they're basically starting from scratch. I don't think there was ever, I've not been made aware of it yet, a completely digital process from beginning to end. At some point, you were printing out on paper and scanning it back in and getting wet signatures and that kind of a thing. We had this process because they didn't trust us to actually manage our own budget, where we had to actually submit to our budget team what we were planning to spend, and then they had to approve it. Well, that process was taking anywhere from 14 to 44 days, right? And you just think about that, just to procure something, how difficult that would actually be. We digitized that and made it completely electronic, and we went down to 2 days max, right? A tremendous return. One of the things I think we talked about when we were setting up this conference was I reduced 60,000 tickets in Wayne County from being created, and those tickets were password resets, right? And all we did was spend $3,000 on a password reset tool and empower people to reset their own password, and here we just eliminated tons of headache from everybody. Not just resetting your password, but unlocking your account. And my call center of only 6 people could definitely manage it more.
Let me interrupt you there. 60,000 tickets for password resets?
Yeah, it sounds exaggerated, right?
A year?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a
Okay.
large county.
So you'd have like, how many people would be working full-time resetting passwords?
Oh, it's six people. That's the bulk of what my call center was doing. And part of my background, being a call center person at one point in my life, I realized these people were capable of much, much more than just resetting passwords. And they were frustrated, right? But they're in that mentality that says, this is all I'm ever going to be allowed to do here, and we can eliminate that and kind of inspire them to do more, and they have. There's so much we could talk about with that. I'm not going to hog the mic or anything. But another tool we've been working with, and Detroit has this also, is C-Click Fix. So we have a lot of potholes in Michigan. I think you guys have probably noticed. Well, this tool allows you to take your phone out, take a picture of the pothole, it gets the GPS coordinates, right? It routes it to the right municipality that can actually fix the pothole or the fallen down tree, and it actually responds to you when it's actually done, right? And it's just one way to actually show that the government's actually doing something, right? And it's something that most of the municipalities are getting on board to actually do. So those are some little innovations that we're trying to do.
Raise your hand if you hit a pothole on the way here today. All right, could use that one.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Mike, what kind of different interfaces have you all built to relate to everyday citizen needs?
Yeah, a couple key initiatives that we've worked on at Oakland County, and if I can first of all say, I walk in the shadow of giants. There's a lot of history at Oakland County of innovation in IT, and I get to talk about it today like I had something to do with it. And I've only been there for a couple years. There are a lot of people, including my former leader, Phil Bertolini, who's a very innovative CIO who just retired last month. Really, he should get most of the credit for this, as well as the team that implements it. But they're very innovative in geographic information systems. And that has led to significant amount of data that's available to the citizens to access property records, for property sales or their own property. Another area that we have a major initiative going on right now is document management. If you think of, we've all heard stories about the courthouse burned down in some tiny little town, and we might have relatives, grandparents or whatever, and their birth certificates are gone. All their records are gone. They were lost in the fire. We've all got that problem, but we're digitizing the records for the clerk and the courts, for probate and circuit and district. It's amazing coming into the public service, into the county government. It's amazing how much we spend on law enforcement and on courts from a budget perspective, but we are providing access to some of those records that the public needs access to. Now they're in a digital format, and it'll help us reduce cost and save them for a much longer period of time.
Jako, what type of efforts, to kind of follow up on that, is Macomb County doing to digitize records? What are some holdups or just things that you just may remain paper? And the court system is probably the most common that people encounter.
Yeah, the one thing we do in government is we create a lot of paper. And it is one of our biggest challenges. In Macomb County, we now have our courts really completely electronic. Everything they do is pretty much electronic, which is a great thing. We're currently working on our prosecutors' environment to do the same thing. The rest of the county, we have to now work on that and see how we can, get by doing all of this. When I said in the beginning we create a lot of paper, the challenges are, really not just, what the paper does is it really creates a lot of storage problems for us. So that's one of the reasons we need to do that. But the biggest thing is really being able to electronically save documents, build workflows, and things like that. It's not stuff traditionally done in government or wasn't done. And like Carlos said, we always fall a little bit behind the private sector. But it is an enormous task, and we're working now on, working on the rest of the county to see how we can change things and make it a little bit more electronic, and things like backups and saving documents and all those requirements that we have in government. It's very difficult when you have paper to deal with.
Jako, are you moving documents to the cloud, or are you using servers, or some
We
combination?
are mostly on-prem at this point in time. We have a very good infrastructure built on-prem. Actually, just refreshed that environment. But our move over the next 5 years is to be cloud ready and do cloud study and so on, and make sure that the next time we have to refresh, that we can make that decision of what needs to move into the cloud and what needs to stay local. So like everybody else, we have to prioritize and see what's the best thing to do next.
Carlos, as a reporter, I've spent quite a lot of time in the dungeon of Coleman A. Young Municipal Center, the basement clerk's office, where you have to go through a DOS-based computer practically. I mean, and scan and find the document you want. Then you have to ask the clerk to go back into the catacombs of that building and find the record. What's Wayne County doing to digitize that, or at least going forward create more digital records? And are you using the cloud yet?
Yeah, we're using the cloud sparingly. It's going to sound like a funny analogy, but I have a lot of kids. I have 5 of them. But everyone always thinks a baby just suddenly starts crawling, right? And there's really not. There's like a bunch of half steps that have to happen in between it. They're doing push-ups. They're doing all kinds of strange things. And all the parents get excited because they're like, this kid's going to crawl. Well, going to the cloud is kind of like that, right? You know what it's supposed to be, you know what the end product's supposed to be, but you have this large transitionary period, right? And so what are those half steps? To be fully cloud ready, you're thinking about scalability, the ability to automatically grow and scale and do all those different things, right? We're not even close to there. Our applications aren't even close. But the infrastructure, right, that those applications can run on, those can go to the cloud. And so that's our first step is virtualizing what we already have, getting in a cloud-ready environment, and then bleeding those pieces into the cloud. So the infrastructure as a service sort of set up. Mm-hmm. But you did talk about the clerk's office. I don't want to take credit for stuff that's not mine. So the clerk is under Wayne County, it's true. But the Coleman A. Young building is actually Detroit.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So I won't be fixing your DOS-based system.
I don't think it was really DOS, but it's Windows 95.
It could very easily be DOS.
Yeah, I mean it's archaic and clunky, to say the least. So, I have personally navigated probably 40 different county clerks in this state, pulling documents for courts records, and of course I've also navigated PACER in the federal system. So I've seen every court there is basically, in every form of record and FOIA request, and I've seen it all basically.
But don't think DOS is going too low. I recently went to the jails and visited and took a look at one of their systems, and we had to put a driver on one of their computers, and I kid you not, it was a 5 1/4 floppy. That's what it was running on, right? QNX Unix operating system. And so, yeah, we've got some old stuff. I have a voicemail system that was installed in 1983. It's the size of 2 refrigerators. It was actually put in place before the Big Mac was invented.
Wow.
Right?
Mike, where are you guys at on this, and are you going to the cloud, or what are some of the pitfalls you see there?
Yeah, I think like Jako and Carlos mentioned, it is one of those things that looks really pretty easy until you start doing it, and I love the baby analogy. We do have a fair amount of our footprint in the cloud at this point, but it's definitely had some fits and starts, and we've had issues, and some of it is culture change, some of it is people that used to know how to build a server. Well, it's just a server, but the permissions are a little different. You have to learn a new way to access the server, and the application teams have to learn a new way to even request what the server looks like and how to build and install. And so we are institutionalizing some of those processes. We do have about 20% of our footprint in the cloud at this point. And that's of the systems that we manage. We have a significant amount of software as a service, our ERP system and our email system. I mean, those are things that people generally do first to kind of, get their foot a little wet, if you will. Working on some of the network changes and authentication changes and identity and access management. SaaS is a good way to start with that. So we have quite a bit of our compute footprint is in SaaS services as well. But that also comes with challenges because now you have to change your contracts. You have to deal with, well, who's responsible for this? And at the end of the day, I'm still responsible for it. I'm responsible for the HIPAA data. I'm responsible for the CGIS data and so on. But now we've got vendors that are taking a bigger role in actually managing it. And so we have to make sure it's secure and our access. I listened to one of the presentations a little earlier, about the mobile device management and, zero trust. And, I know one of the things that we want to talk about is what are our big challenges? Well, that's one of my big challenges, is device from anywhere, anybody's device, there's a lot to that as well. And the cloud, just kind of, exponentially makes that more complicated.
Are you building apps, building websites and interfaces that are more focused on being mobile ready versus desktop, or what's your kind of balance right now in that regard? If I want to go on and search campaign finance records, I don't think I've ever done it with my phone with your 3 counties, but if I wanted to, how easy would that be?
The apps that we build, we absolutely do try to make them, mobile friendly, multi-device friendly, responsive design basically. But there's a lot more to it than that. That part is almost easy at this point. What's more difficult is identifying, are you supposed to have access to this? And are you who you say you are? And yes, there's a lot of tools and technology to do that. But especially when we talk about giving access to the general public to information that needs to be held securely, public records are relatively easy in that regard.
That's what you're saying, yeah, okay. On this subject of just general cybersecurity, I was kind of going on the line. Jako, where are you at on your current challenges right now as it relates to cybersecurity?
So we all have our challenges, how we build out cybersecurity at local government level. And what we decided to do was to create a position for a security administrator. And we did an RFQ and pretty much for a partner in security. And the idea behind that was that we really want to partner with the private sector to help augment our cybersecurity needs. The difficulties there is, as in government, we don't deal with everything that a bank, for instance, deal on a daily basis, and many different types of businesses. Our partners have knowledge and deal with those type of things on a regular basis. So they bring those type of things to the table, as well as on our end, then making sure that we have a good cybersecurity posture. In government today, as you probably all know, we feel like this, that we're being furiously attacked from the ransomware standpoints and things like that you see in local government, where this is happening all across the country, and especially at city level, cities, villages, and townships, and many of those attacks very successful. And so those are the type of things that keep us awake at night, and that you need to think of and make sure that we have the right defenses in place and that we can do the best with the resources that we have available to us.
Carlos?
Yeah, so security was obviously a major concern, and when you knew that you didn't have the tools for a long time, I think the most important thing you had to do was you had to know where you thought your sensitive data was, and then you had to come up with some kind of a tool to locate where data might exist that you didn't know about. And so we have actually invested in some tools that actually goes out and classifies documents electronically wherever they sit in the county so that we can actually secure them. And we have built a secure place to put them. So that was like the first part. And then of course you invest in some of these AI tools that do some profiling and make sure the activity that's going on in your network is what it's supposed to be. And so for the first time, we went from 1 security guy to 3, and they've got a full-time job trying to keep up with the traffic on the network and to avoid our people from giving away their passwords, right? So we had a very big issue with people not being tech savvy and just falling for phishing attempts. It would happen, we'd catch it right away. We caught it on Thanksgiving. And no one's ever been able to get anything out of Wayne County, but we definitely needed to invest in those tools to jump on it quickly. And of course, we invested in a cybersecurity training program and made it mandatory through HR. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so we're going through that right now, and folks are going through the training for it. We've also implemented something called multi-factor authentication so that you can't just get your email remotely if you're a hacker, right? You actually have to have a phone and the email and the password to actually get in, which has helped us out a lot.
Mike, and also, have you ever had a data breach? Either one of you?
We've had attempts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been going on nationwide.
Right.
A lot of the attempts that you see that were successful in Florida, I don't mean to speak for both of you, but it was a big deal to me, right? There were some successful attempts in Florida where they actually compromised people's payroll records, right? Yeah, those same hacking groups are hitting everyone in Michigan and everyone in the country. Sometimes people do give away their credentials. It just matters what you do with it after you find out that they're trying.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, similar to Carlos, I mean, we have absolutely had phishing attempts, and we've implemented training, and that is obviously, that's one of the weakest links, one of the easiest areas to attack, and the training and reminders and broadcast messages, and that's part of the reinforcement. Frankly, I don't want to revel in anybody else's trouble, but especially being in government, and regardless of where you are as an IT professional, the fact that all of our peers, and I'll say in other states, whether it's Baltimore or Atlanta or Texas or wherever it is, whether it's in government or private sector, I mean, is there anybody in here that hasn't had their information compromised? I mean, I was part of the Anthem breach and the Equifax breach, and so the fact that it's happening to quote unquote everybody, at least now the business case is easier for me to put together when I go for funding for a tool to help analyze the network, or a tool to analyze our data, or tools to help us block and detect and monitor. The hard part is it will never be done. I mean, this is one of those games or one of those jobs that will just constantly get more complicated, because it's now an international business. I mean, and hackers will tell you. I mean, the biggest thing now with malware and ransomware, the FBI will tell you that they're just doing it as a business. So they do tell you not to pay a ransom, but they also tell you that if you pay the ransom, you're likely to get the encryption codes, because whoever did it is just a businessman and they have a reputation. And the next time they do it, they want their reputation to speak for itself, that if you pay the ransom, I'll give you your keys back. So it's going to go on for a long time like this. It's tough.
Kind of transition from that, I was actually going to ask about this, and you kind of brought it up. I'm sorry, Jako, you all are in government, and you're highly trained and experts in this field. It's very technical. You work for people who don't maybe speak this language, and I'm assuming some people in this room also work for somebody who doesn't speak their language every day. So how do you go to the county executive or the county commissioner who doesn't have a lot of knowledge about malware and such, and sell, hey, I need $1 million for this server, or I need this appropriation to get this type of equipment. What's some tips you have for folks who probably do this in the private sector every day too?
Well, yesterday I went with my budget to the board for 2020 and went through that process. And one of the questions I got was why our budget seemingly every year increase at a significant percentage, and that it's not sustainable, which is a very valid argument, doing that year after year, and you have to come, and it's very difficult explaining that, to non-technical people. It's very difficult explaining it to technical people. But the reality is, what I tried to convey was that, I use the analogy from back in the Microsoft days when you had your first copy of Microsoft. It was really very cheap to get that on your computer. Today, when you put a copy of Microsoft on your computer, it is not as cheap anymore. It's costing more. When you buy hardware, back in the day, we had to buy a whole data center full of hardware. Now you just buy one little unit and it does all that, for you. It's not as tangible as it was when you think about virtualization and all these type of things. So that's kind of how I try to explain it, that it's very difficult, and I completely have appreciation for the thought that we cannot sustain budget increase in the double digits every year. But on the other hand, too, if you want to stay with the times, you also need to be aware of that, and you make those investments. And it's very difficult to back out and say, well, we're going to do things differently now. So really not an easy thing to explain, but those tough questions will come to us as IT people, and we've got to be able to sell our stuff to our boards and executives and so forth.
Carlos, I imagine it's not as easy as the road department just wasn't going to fill a couple hundred more potholes next year. You can't necessarily put those decisions off in this field.
No, you can't. In a lot of ways, I was very lucky, and I have a very unusual story because technology had been ignored for so long, and they had never received any of the return on investment that they would have had for many, 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 many years. So I came in and I realized that I think I could bring something to the table with an as-is environment. I had the lowest budget the county or IT department had in 15 years when I started. And everyone had been saying they can't do anything with technology because they don't have the money. In the first year, I was able to find $1,000 in savings, deliver on things that hadn't been done in 9 years, and I got a lot of trust that way. Plus, coming from Quicken Loans, being downtown Detroit and seeing how big of an impact they had, the commissioners, had a lot of respect for someone coming out of that environment. So when I finally did come to ask, they said, "Okay, we'll give you a shot." So I got a 35% increase on my operational budget. After the first year, which is the first time in 15 years. Like I said, I've been very lucky.
You probably were one of the only departments that got.
Oh, I'm a tax. I don't know if you know this. IT in Wayne County is actually a tax on other departments. So my department is actually funded from their budget. So when my budget goes up, their budget goes down. But you know what? I got the buy-in from the business, and they agreed that the best way to move forward and find efficiencies was going to be through technology, and that's it.
Yeah, Mike, have you, in your role, had to make these kind of pitches to the brass and try to explain why
Absolutely.
We need more money here?
Yeah, and I think both Jako and Carlos make a great point. If you focus first on the business benefit, in some ways, I used to hate it. I started as an engineer. I used to hate it when people told me that, you know, everybody's a salesman. And the fact is, I think that's true. You know, and it's really about, you know, not being a salesman in terms of revenue, but I have to sell an idea. And that means I have to communicate. I have to understand where my audience is and, you know, and what brings value to my audience and how can I translate my need into their value. And that's the real, you know, the real work is figuring out how to bring value to my customer. But the points about, you know, identifying the business value, and second, if you can bring efficiencies into the operation through technology, and most of us are able to do that with many of our technology ideas. I mean, the network infrastructure, you know, typically doesn't bring an efficiency to the organization, but a new application will. So that idea of bringing savings to the organization on the one hand so that we can increase expenses in some of the infrastructure or security or, you know, other places where we need to make investment. I mean, I think those are key parts.
Carlos, I wanted to talk a little bit about getting talent into your organization. Just recently, I interviewed the senior vice president of human resources at Bosch in North America in Farmington Hills. They have 125 software developer jobs open right now. They're so desperate for people. They are just finding people within the ranks and starting training programs to teach them how to code because they literally cannot find other people just to do that job, and they're tired of being in bidding wars for talent and such. Kind of curious about how you've been able to see this, or what do you see? What do you offer in government that's different, especially from your time, you know, in the rat race, I might sort of speak, of corporate America.
Well, yeah, I was fortunate. I got to work in, you know, 2 of the top 50 places to work in IT. That's not usual. And I did the rat race thing for a while, and I loved it. You know, I've said this before. Leading IT people is a little different than leading normal business people. I've never seen it. I've said this before, so if you've heard me or read my LinkedIn, you'll know I've said this before. But I've never seen a child actually steal their parents' checkbook just for the pleasure of balancing it, right? But if you talk to an IT person, you'll find out they stole software their entire young life just so they could learn how to use it. You know what I mean? They were hacking Windows servers, not making money on it. They just wanted to play with it. My IT people, they come to work every day and they do technology. And they go home and they do technology. They do it for free. Their family and their friends ask them to do it. They love it. They love being smart with it. And so leading IT people is more about recognizing how creative they actually are and kind of restricting them so they actually get something done instead of just doing technology for technology's sake. Yeah, so you talk about recruiting and retention. I'm not 100% sure why I've been so fortunate with it, but I will tell you one thing that government offers that private sector didn't, which is your job really can stop at 5 o'clock, right? Generally speaking, everyone leaves. In private sector, you could be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's a 24-hour business. Even just doing maintenance after hours, you can do that at 6 o'clock. You're going to bed at a normal time. That's amazing. This is going to sound crazy to some of you who aren't public sector, but I get 2 weeks off for Christmas. It doesn't even affect my vacation time at all. I get my birthday off. Like, it is amazing how much time off you can get in the government. And when you have young people entering the workforce, yeah, a Quicken Loans, a Jack Henry, an Amazon, it sounds great. But when you're starting a family, when you're starting to get more serious, you're really going to want to have that guaranteed work-life balance, right? And a lot of folks will come over, even if they're capable of making more money somewhere else, just to get that consistency.
Mike, do you have talent recruitment issues when you're competing with the Bosches of the world for coders and such?
Well, and Wayne County, we don't get 2 weeks off at Christmas.
Well, you got a new county executive, maybe he'll change things.
It's yes, it is very, very competitive, and certain jobs more so than others. But yeah, I mean, the whole industry is seeing it, the region is seeing it, and to Carlos's point, I mean, we do try to do some things and have brought some innovative things that maybe are in the public sector or private sector that weren't part of public sector traditionally. We have renovated some of our workspaces with stand-up desks and an open office area, which might not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but it was a big deal in this particular government IT shop. We have flexible work schedules, for most people, and there's a lot of work-life balance. The other thing too is, fantastic benefit program, compared to at least my experience in the private sector. So it's always going to be difficult, and government's never going to pay as much. It's taxpayer dollars. I mean, every one of you is funding our salaries, right? So it's hard to say, you got a raise, can I have one? Nobody likes doing that, but we do that all the time when we ask for more money out of government, and it's hard. So the alternative is you end up with a government that doesn't have a balanced budget, or ends up with issues like we want to fix the damn roads, right? Everybody wants to fix the roads, but we can't agree on how to fund it, and those challenges will always exist.
Jako, how have you managed this?
Everything that my counterparts said, we've been from a retention standpoint, we've been pretty fortunate, and it really comes from legacy in Macomb County regarding pensions and things like that. But with our newer appointees, we've already felt the difference, and retention, obviously hiring the right people and retention is high on our list, and making sure, and we're trying with different ways to help this with things like 410 work days in the summer and so on. And it really comes down to work-life balance for the younger folks, the stand-up desks, things like that. We trying those different things just to make it more appealing. And then, Macomb County is fortunate in the sense that we have a 7.5-hour workday and not an 8-hour workday. Makes a difference for some people. So everything that we can do, around that, money is we don't pay as much as the private sector, and we just have a development position open right now. We posted for the position, wasn't successful, and we're going to go back to the drawing board and post again. So it's not that easy to hire good people.
And one thing I was going to add to that, because you asked about recruiting, and then you mentioned retention, and made me think of this. One thing that is unique when you get to the government is you find out how large the responsibility set actually is, right? When you work for a normal company, not that Quicken doesn't have 100 different companies, but let's say it's Quicken, it's mostly about mortgages, and that's your focus. When you go into government, it's smart cities, it's the clerks, it's the register of deeds, it's the prosecuting attorney's office, it's the sheriff, it's the jails. The responsibility set is enormous, and these people can touch all of that, which is very exciting to a lot of technology people. It doesn't necessarily get them in the door, but it does keep them interested.
Yeah, you got to learn what the Register of Deeds does. Start. Yeah. One thing you touched on, is Macomb County still entering new employees into pensions, or is there a 401k?
Not the same. It's for a 401k. Not the same as the pension.
But you've held on to long-term employees because they're
so
they're vested
long-term
in the
employees
pension
stay.
system.
But as you know, through attrition over time, that's going to change, and we need to be ready for that. But that's kind of starting to happen to us as well now, and just something we have to deal with.
And Mike, you guys are in 401k, right?
We actually have a defined contribution plan for basically all new employees for the last 15 years or so.
Okay.
So it is a pension, but it's defined contribution that the county does contribute, I think, I don't remember if it's 5% or 7%, and then we have a mandatory 2% match to that as an employee. And then separate from that, there's a 401k that we can separately contribute.
So you got a hybrid of sorts.
Right.
Yeah. And what's Wayne County now?
So I believe it's a hybrid. Now, if you're an appointee, it's 401k only, and it's pretty decent. But we had this really big issue with our pension Yeah, obviously, you probably knew about that. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I've read about it.
But we're making some pretty big inroads into funding it properly. But in my department, most of my people are new. I mean, I started with 23 full-time employees when I started, and now we're at 60. So, yeah, it's not really been much of a factor.
Yeah, I mean, I just went wondering whether this is a recruitment issue. I've just known some friends who turned down jobs recently, different sectors, because they were still on pensions, and they looked at it and they're in their 30s and like, I don't think I'm going to have a chance at that, you know, or it's just a turnoff if there's not a 401k. At least that's what I kind of pick up on people in their late 30s who are kind of looking at different transitions. So I want to take a chance here while we have just a little bit more time. If anybody has any questions in the audience for our panelists, gentleman in the back will come on around and get you. Someone's got to have some questions. Well, we could just adjourn and go to the bar, or, okay, he's got a question.
So do your organizations have anything to do with any of the, I know there was, in Detroit, there was the police force was using some technology related to like facial detection and things like that. Are you guys familiar with that, and how do you feel about organizations, governments using that kind of technology?
I think he's referring to the green light program in the city of Detroit. There are camera systems in private businesses that are feeding to DPD, their big central command. They were looking at, and they never actually implemented facial recognition software. Is that something that you all are looking at in your your county sheriff's departments at all?
We are not looking at that. From what I know today, we're not looking at that, so
Okay.
not sure.
In Wayne County, no.
And we don't have any major initiatives that are, you know, close to implementing that technology, but our sheriff department is always looking at that kind of technology, you know, and that includes body cams and all of that. I happened to be traveling a couple weeks ago overseas, and I was flying on Delta out of Detroit, and to board the plane, there was facial recognition, and it compared. I had to obviously do my passport when I boarded for this international flight, but the facial recognition compared my passport to my boarding record to let me get on the plane, and then immigration coming back in to Detroit Metro is now using facial recognition. So, you know, it's happening in some sectors, but yeah, we're not using it yet at the county level.
Real quickly, are your counties sheriffs using body cams, and what is that adding to the stress of your IT systems, capturing all this video that has to be stored somewhere?
A lot of storage, obviously. Yeah, we have body cameras, and we also have in-car cameras. Create a lot of you know, storage challenges. You know, we prepared for that. What we're not prepared for is over time it adds on as it improves and people get used to it. You know, it's probably one not just in the sheriff's department, but we're talking traffic cameras, you know, things like that. There's always new cameras at some point in the county that somebody wants to record, whether it's the sheriff's department, the courts, in-court recordings and things like that. It is a challenge to keep up. But that's the one part of it. The other part of it that's a big concern is, you know, how do we search all that? When we get FOIA requests, a lot of pressure come on IT so that we need to search the footage and do things like that. We also don't, you know, have the people to be able to do that all the time. So, you know, those are things we need to navigate as this increase.
Yeah. Carlos, Wayne County Sheriff's got body cams?
We do, but the best part about that is that's one area we're actually in the cloud. We're not going to put that storage on-prem, so it's backed up in the cloud.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions in the audience? Oh, yeah.
Could you elaborate, what are your top priorities for a smart city, like top 2 or top 3 priorities? When you say smart cities, what does that entail?
Want to go first?
You know, when it comes to smart cities, to be quite honest with you, most of that's driven by our executive office and Department of Roads. But we've taken certain corridors in Macomb County when they build out, I think it was Mound Road, they did the whole Mound Road prepped and ready for, you know, everything regarding smart cities. It's obviously costly. Roads in itself is a huge challenge, as we all know here in Michigan. So to add that on top of it, you know, it's going to be interesting how this is going to move forward.
Yeah, generally speaking, I think it's a funding issue. So I don't have a top 3. I kind of have a top 1. So I always want to try to reduce something if I implement some technology. So one of the things we're trying to do is actually use sensors on bridges to make sure that they're there's gaps on bridges, right? And as they get wider and smaller with weather, they can cause problems. Well, you can actually put sensors in there that can phone home and tell you the status of the bridge and the temperature and how wide the gap is getting and those kind of things. I guess the battery on those things lasts something like a year and 7 months. So you can send inspectors out far less frequently. And I think that's useful. I think a lot of times I hear people talking about traffic control. I find it hard to pitch that, though, because I can have a police officer guiding traffic, and his salary is far less than the cost of all the technology and the ability to secure that technology and maintain that technology going forward. So I'm not too motivated to reach into that area yet, unless it's somehow grant funded and it makes sense to the constituency and the executive office.
Yeah, and similar to as Jako mentioned, most of our work in that area is really managed out of our economic development as well as our road commission. But I will say that a couple of the investment kinds of things that we have done is around geographic information systems. So we've made a big investment in GIS software that is rolled out really to all county departments as well as the cities, villages, and townships. And a lot of work has been involved in, you know, investment in training and investment in, you know, really user groups to then share successes. So, you know, the city of Novi can do something and share it with the city of Wixom, and that whole collaboration is just, it's you know, if you remember the first time we implemented like Microsoft Excel in the finance department, I mean, this is 30-some years ago, but all of a sudden you didn't need IT professionals to program reports and program finance systems. You could do a ton of stuff on a spreadsheet. Well, that's happening with GIS. And to have some of the growth in maps and to be able to, you know, send to our police department, you know, here's where some of the public safety items are, or to let our fire departments know, here's where the fire hydrants are at the place where you're going. Those are simple applications, but you know, to make it more valuable to, you know, John Q. Public, you know, I think as Carlos mentioned, there's still some value case that still needs to be made, and that will come. The other thing that is a challenge right now for governments is the advent of 5G. And 5G is going to affect, you know, smart cities and affect a whole bunch of things, connected vehicles potentially, and you know, there's a lot of technology and infrastructure required to process communication. And 5G is one way to do it. There's lots of other ways to do it, but to Carlos's point, there's a lot of work that has to go into the standards and, you know, the interfaces, and the technology is still pretty expensive, at least in some ways, to make it usable for an application. So it'll come.
Any other questions?
Hi, my question is regarding the connected vehicles. that are coming up. So how would that impact you as a, the owner of all these roads and rules around that?
I'm not sure I heard the question. I
Connected
apologize.
How will connected vehicles affect or impact the counties, the county-owned roads? How are you going to adapt to that new technology? And you're going to be sharing the roads. We're going to have a period of years, maybe decades, where we'll have non-connected gas guzzlers sharing the road with robots.
Yeah, one of the challenges that I know some work is going on is really at the legislative level. There's, aside from the technology, that the problem with the technology is it's the Sony Betamax thing, right? And this is even much more complicated, but eventually a standard will emerge, but right now that's a problem. And the second thing is at the legislative level, who gets to control the roads and who gets to control the data and what data is it and what do you do about private data? There's a host of privacy issues and legislative issues that there's a lot of work that still has to go into that, but then also, how does the government, the government is responsible for some of that infrastructure, but when we transfer from Macomb County to Wayne County or Wayne County to Oakland County, those kinds of interfaces, again, technology as well as the legal aspects, those kinds of challenges will get solved like they always do. We do public safety and police can transfer radio calls between counties and cities and whatnot, but there were times when we weren't able to do that. So those things will get solved, but those are still big challenges right now. And funding is a huge one.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the legislative part of that is going to be a big deal. I think in Michigan it might be less of a big deal than other states. Autonomous vehicles, it's really kind of a Michigan-grown technology, and I can't see the legislature not wanting to support businesses in Michigan. So I do see it probably being adopted here faster than elsewhere, but I don't have any real clear initiatives in front of me right now to make that happen.
Any more questions?
We got time for one more question.
Going once? Okay. All right. Well, hey, thank you very much to Mike Timm, Carlos Perez, and Jako van Blerk for joining us here and being our keynote speaker and informing this nice audience about all that you're doing in county government.
It was a pleasure.
Hear from all, the whole panel, including our moderator. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere yet.
Yep. Yeah, got that for you. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Check, check. Okay, as you will notice, we have a bunch of blue shirts walking around. If you finished your surveys, please find your nearest WIT representative and get your raffle ticket. We're going to raffle off a $100 gift card to Amazon here momentarily. And don't go anywhere. We have the sponsors doing the raffles as well. So, full of giveaways. Make sure you're getting your raffle tickets. And sponsors who are going to be raffling off prizes, do you want to kind of come up towards the stage here? Sponsors, come on up. If you have something to raffle off. Yeah, come on up. There you go. Just go ahead. Yeah, who you're with and who's the winner and all that fun stuff.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right? I'm Ryan DePietro. I'm with Box, the cloud content management company. So thank you, everybody, for stopping by. Can everybody hear me okay? A little bit better. Okay. I'll start over. I'm Ryan DePietro. I'm with Box, the cloud content management company. Thank you very much for everybody for stopping by our booth. We really appreciate it. We're giving away 2 tickets to the Lions-Vikings game on October 20th. Yeah, so here we go. The winner is Kalpana Yenderli from Ally Financial. Is Kalpana here?
Oh, there she is.
All right. Go Lions.
Thank you, sir. Awesome. Okay, next up. Here you go.
Hello, my name is Greg Spriggs. I'm with Micro Focus Vertica, and we are giving away an eco show today. And the winner is, as my phone dies, David Reeser at FCA. Oh, all right.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Come on up and get your prize. All right, who's next?
I'm Kurt Layson. I'm with Talon. We're giving away an Apple TV, and I'll let you pick.
Oh, I get to pick?
Yeah.
Out of all these? Oh. I didn't look. Oh. Shawadi?
Schwab. FAQI.
SH.
Sorry. Thank you very much.
There you go. You gotta see some ID. All right. Next up.
Hey there, my name is Sachin Koshi. I'm with the UiPath, the RPA leader in the space. So, and my phone turned off. Excellent. The winner for a $100 Amazon gift card is Alan Fletmeyer. Hey, there you go. All right.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Congratulations. Up next.
How's it going? I'm Joseph with Time Extender. And we have a Fitbit Charge. The winner is Sherry DiFiore.
Perfect. Congratulations, Sherry. And our last one here from our sponsors.
Hi, thank you. Kelly Shaw from Centrify, Regional Sales Manager. The winner of our Beats Solo wireless headset is Steve Thalen. Uh-oh.
You gotta be here.
You gotta be here?
You gotta be here. You got a number 2?
There
you go. Steve's not here. Going once. Twice. I guess it's mine.
Vanessa Braden, Priority Health.
She's your coworker.
I see your coworker. Come on up. Do you want to
take it for her?
Do you want to take it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. It's his prize. Congratulations. And then now the final raffle for the $100 Amazon gift card. I'll hold it. You pick. Close your eyes. Don't cheat. Everybody have their raffle? No, of course, I can't see anything. Everybody got their raffle tickets in front of them? 8, 6, 4, 4, 5, 2. Hey, we got a winner. That concludes the summit. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember, save the date. Come back in March.